Thanks, guys, for joining us. We have special guests, which is Alvin and Lance from State Termite. In a real estate transaction, there's a lot of key components. You guys would all agree, I'm sure. And when you represent a buyer, the whole point of escrow is to do due diligence, right? Because day one, the property looks nice. You're kind of in that honeymoon phase. Everything looks great. And you have a 30 to 45 day window, which is your escrow period, where you're kind of dating the property to see, like, do I really even want to be married and tied to this property at the end? And typically, if you do everything right, by the end of escrow, you probably will know more about that property than the seller knows about that property. That's fair to say, right? Like, even if the property had been owned and lived in for 20 years, the seller wasn't like doing home inspections and wasn't having a termite inspector in and wasn't having plumbers and electricians in unless it's needed. So at the end of this short time frame, which is escrow, hopefully the buyer is confident enough to move forward with their purchase. And on the flip side of that, you might have a seller or repeat client that you sold a property to that might ask you. I'm big on being kind of the source of information, being a consultant, a true consultant to your clients. Having the right pest control termite inspector is really, really crucial to that transaction. And I'm sure there's a lot of questions. For some new agents, you might not know what to ask. For some experienced agents, you might have had a run-in or a situation. Some things, for instance, for newer agents is our contract, as standard boilerplate purchase contract, would have it as such that you can't convey a property with live infestation, right? It could have damage. It could have termite damage. The real, I think, sticking point that I often will see, and hopefully Lance and Alvin will address it too, is the termite droppings, is the termite doo-doo, is that old or new? Right? Like, do we need to tent it? Because if we just had the thing tented, like, some of those things come up, and some inspectors will say, well, when was it done? Show me a receipt. Is there a warranty attached to it? Because there's the liability for them too. They don't want to assume some of that stuff. So when they make a suggestion in our contract, the way that our contract is written, assuming there's no verbiage that overrides that, is that the seller has to pay for and is financially responsible for the suggestions that are made by the termite inspector. But who gets to choose the inspector? The buyer, right? So you ought to choose a well-respected, reputable company like State Termite. So without further ado, I wanted to bring them up. They're going to chat with us for a little bit and go over Termite 101, which is a fantastic thing. So welcome up, Alvin and Lance. Thanks so much for joining us, guys. I greatly appreciate it. So you can control the slides, click of the mouse, whoever wants to run it. Oh, yeah. And microphones there, cameras there. We'll be right here.
Okay. So we don't get to see what we look like while we're doing this. Okay,
So
good morning,
sorry,
everyone.
click the slide and it'll go.
Yeah.
Okay.
If not, then...
Okay, there you go.
Okay, so yeah, so I've been around a long time. When first started, we were called the young whippersnappers, and now I'm the dinosaur because I've been around so long. I've owned the company since 1991. I've been in the industry again since 1976. Started in wood treating, then moved on to island termite, vet termite, and eventually bought out State Termite in 91. Been all the officers in our Hawaii Pest Control Association. I've been on the state pesticides board. Yeah, I've been sure. And then Lance here has been with us almost 14
years. Yeah. Well, not as long as you, but
yeah, and when he first started, it wasn't just come with me. He started in trenches. He was doing the work, learning what we do. And so it wasn't just, well, he's the boss's son, so he just goes with the boss. No, he was actually doing the treatments, crawling under houses, going into the attics, doing the treatments.
Yeah.
And so he's learned from the bottom up. And so it's not just being in the company because your dad owns the company. He is a member, actually officer for the Hawaii Pest Control Association right now.
Yeah.
He was the treasurer. Now he's going to be the secretary. And typically you advance to president.
Yeah, eventually. Okay. Okay, I guess we're just gonna
Talk
hop
about,
right into it.
yeah. So two main kinds of termites in Hawaii that actually attack people's homes. There's actually 8 different species, but two main ones are the subterranean termites, the Formosan subterranean termites. Reason why this particular termite is so important is because it's the most destructive. Colonies can be in the millions. And for that reason, if they're coming up into your home, in a few months' time, they can do considerable damage. It could be, the nest could be over 300 feet away, up to 10 feet on the ground. So it doesn't have to be in your particular property. It could be your neighbor's place somewhere far away. With ground termites, they do need a lot of moisture. So to some extent, that's one thing you can watch for to help minimize your risk with ground termites. Ultimately, there are treatments that can be done to prevent ground termites also. So those things are good to know. Actually, a lot of people don't realize that ground termites can actually fly. They use, a lot of times we'll go to people's homes and they'll say, oh, ground termites are flying termites. And that's really common. We know what they mean, what they're trying to say when they talk about flying termites. But actually, I would say a lot of times when they're seeing termites flying around, they're probably seeing ground termites because the colonies are so large that when they're swarming by the thousands. So they're pretty noticeable. I remember watching Rainbow Baseball, and the announcers would go, "Wow, look at all the termites flying around the lights!" And I'm like, "Well, ground termites," and that's really common in Hawaii, seeing big swarms of termites flying around the lights. Typically, the good thing with ground termites is because they need a lot of water, even if they get into your homes, they typically die. It's a really small percentage of the swarmers that actually are able to start a colony, because they need to have the right conditions, and that means food and water and some place to hide. So because they're attracted to light, they fly to your homes, they land, they lose their wings, they crawl around. But once in the home, if there's no moisture situations available, they end up dying. So ends up being more of a nuisance more than anything else. But it's still, they're coming into the house. Typically, what you're watching for are the mud tunnels, dirt trails coming up the base of the house. If you have a posted house, it could be up the blocks, around the sides. But if you don't watch for those tunnels, then by the time you notice it, it could be leaning on a door frame and, oh, it's hollow. What happened? It's kind of amazing how fast they can do damage to your home. This is a video of a mud tunnel. So it looks like a little dirt trail. It actually looks kind of hard to see if you're not watching for it. But there you go. If you break open that and you see little white things crawling around, you better take care of it
Quickly.
yeah.
We can check.
So you can kind of see ones with the brown head, and you see the white one on the bottom didn't have the brown head. The white ones, those that you see crawling right there, that's the worker. That's the one that actually does all the damage. Eats the wood, takes care of the colony. Actually, the other one that you see with the brown head, those are the soldiers. If there were only soldiers there, they wouldn't do any damage because they don't have the mouth parts to actually bite and do damage to the house. The workers have to feed them. So their duty of the soldier is just to protect the colony. When there's a disturbance, the soldiers come up, guard the area, the workers run away. You guys have,
Click the little arrow on the bottom left hand side.
Oh, there it
and
is.
It'll go to the next slide.
There you go.
Good.
There you go.
okay, hopefully you haven't seen stuff like this. This is ground termite damage to a house. The damage to the walls, even some up in the ceiling, the little holes up there. There was actually a shower behind this wall. And what was happening was, yeah, as you can, well, it's an older house, single wall. The bathroom behind, and what was happening was the water was getting behind the shower.
I have a question.
Sure.
So when you're looking at this and you're seeing it and determining that it's ground termites, can you tell by the damage or the way the damage is coming up that it's specifically ground versus another type?
Typically, yeah.
Just by looking at the damage?
Yeah.
So generally with ground termite damage, usually one of the first clues is if you see really big damage,
It's great.
that's almost always ground termites. Not to say drywood termites cannot do that, but majority of the time when you see big damage, and especially if it happened pretty quickly, you're seeing ground termites. I guess the other thing that you're looking for is if you see mud or dirt in the damage, then that's another way to tell that's ground termites. The other termite that's very common are drywood termites, and they have sand-like droppings.
We'll go to
So,
that. We can go to
yeah,
that.
we'll explain a little bit more about the drywood termites a little later, but that's the easiest way to tell is when you look at the damage. If you see sand in there, that's drywood termites. If you see mud, that's ground termites. Yeah, yeah. So this was actually pretty recently.
Yeah.
We went to this house and the owner just took over the house from the parents because the parents passed away. And the dad actually did a lot of things. They did several additions to the house. And he actually had a storage room where that storage room was full of ground termites. On the counter, there was mud all over his things. And then she showed us in the house, and we went into this back bedroom, and she said she doesn't really go in there. She uses it more for storage. And we went in there and we looked at the ceiling, and that's mud from ground termites on the ceiling. It's like, wow.
And then I guess to elaborate too, when she kind of saw this, but she wasn't sure what it was. So she called a roofer, and the roofer told her, oh, that's just Koenig and nothing to worry about. And so that was a few weeks before, and we came in, she kind of told us the story, and we're like, oh, that's just not Koenig, it's ground termite stuff. So it's just kind of what, I guess, when you call other professions, when they try to tell you stuff about other professions, I guess.
Yeah, so he's not an expert in termites.
So it
And
was
so kind of maybe
got-
delayed the process a little bit because he said, oh yeah, that's just the Koenig ceiling. Yeah. But actually, besides that, there was a beam running across the room that was
this being
hollow.
right here.
Yeah.
I don't know if you can see it.
Yeah, so actually, yeah, the beam, actually, unfortunately, she had like roof leaks going on too. So just kind of a lot of problems that actually are conducive to ground termites. She knows she got a lot of work to do, but actually now she has process, okay? Treat the termites first.
Fix the roof for
Yeah, she has to do some repairs because some of the damage is structural. And then the last step kind of is like doing the roof.
For something that extensive, is the recommended treatment to tent it?
No,
no.
yeah, no. So you want to explain?
Oh, you can.
Reason is this is ground termite damage. Tenting is for drywood termites. And so if you tented the house and you had this kind of damage,
Actually, we can go into that
yeah,
right
we
after
can kind of
this
explain
because
about that too. But yeah, so the tenting is
we have a
not
slide for that.
for ground termites.
Yeah.
This is just examples of
Ground termite
the
damage.
damage that they can do.
And
Yeah.
what's scary with ground termite damage is they're actually eating from the inside out. So most times, again, you won't know that they're there until something actually collapses or something, it gets compressed.
Made their way through it.
Yeah. So that's, I guess, the scary part with ground termites.
Yeah, so they're kind of silent killers, so to
Yeah.
speak, with termites because they don't make noise. And when you find the damage, sometimes it's like, wow, there's a lot of damage already. Yeah. On the right, there's actually just pile of lumber that they took out, and even ground termites were coming up from the ground, getting into the lumber that they had stored on the side. Yeah.
This one.
Um,
So this is a kind of a house that we just did. They just had it fumigated in October. And kind of, I guess, kind of common in your guys' industry. It's like, okay, we had it fumigated. Why do we need a termite inspection? And this is kind of a reason why I think.
one really good reason why you don't
So
say you don't
they
need
know
the
that there was
termite
damage,
inspection.
so they fumigated the house. But what I guess they didn't know was that there was ground termites. So if it's kind of hard to see, but this is the stairs. And it's right in this corner. It's kind of a blow up picture of that area. There's a mud tunnel coming up. So
You can actually see termite soldier to the right of the arrow, that little white thing down there. Yeah, right there. That's actually termite that came out when we broke open the tunnel. Excuse me. Do you both have questions? Just
yeah, please.
shout it out, whatever, stop us, whatever. Yeah, so that's why, as Lance said, a lot of times you have seller side telling you, hey, place was just fumigated, you don't need to do the inspection. But inspection is also for ground termites and even for damage. Yeah. So if you say, okay, well, good, we don't need it, it was fumigated, we have a 5-year warranty, but then it's
Something
not
like
gonna
this
cover stuff like
could
this. Yeah.
I guess the scary part was that because it just started again, the house was just renovated. So most people, it's a posted house too. So most people wouldn't go underneath the house. And maybe 6 months to a year later, all the renovations that they did, now there's, oh, you see damage. And then it's like, oh, what happened? I thought we had a termite inspection. And then they're like, oh, I guess if these clients didn't have a a good real estate agent, then we wouldn't, or they wouldn't have known that it was ground termites versus drywood termites, and that fumigation didn't cover nothing to do with this.
So fumigation may stop whatever's in the house because they're in the house. But once the tent is removed, all the gas dissipates. There's nothing left behind to stop the ground termites from coming back into the house again. So that's why it's not the treatment for ground termites.
The treatment for ground is the treatment.
So
yeah,
yeah, so there's two methods: liquid treatment, typically, where you're talking about drilling, doing holes around the perimeter of the house, or going underneath the house and treating around the blocks, or you can do baiting like Centricon. There's actually different bait programs available, but Centricon's probably the most widely known one. Both systems actually work well. It just depends on situation. Typically liquid treatments are for 5 years, warranties for 5 years, whereas baiting typically could be 1 year warranties that you have to renew every year. And there's typically more labor involved because you have to check the stations regularly.
I have a question. Is it possible, I'm not gonna name another company, but is it possible to some of the kind of the mainland or branded companies or what have you, the termite companies could, for lack of a better term, misdiagnose which one it is and treat one when it should be the other? Or could it just be that it's just such a fast moving destructive species that I ask that because there's been situations where, like you described, we go in and treatment was just done no more than 60 days ago, and yet there's evidence, not of the damage, but evidence of actual live infestation. And we're like, how did that even happen?
Mhm.
They just had the treatment done. So my question is, could they have misdiagnosed which one it was and treated the wrong one? Or is it just so fast moving that now it needs to be treated again?
I guess it's possible to be misdiagnosed. I guess with your mainland companies, they're kind of having a lot of turnover.
Yeah.
Too. So I don't know what their training is. And we do see it too, like just through homeowners and whatnot. But yeah, they do sometimes misdiagnose. But I'm not, it's hard to say one way or the other without knowing the full
Did you
situation.
come in when another company had already done some treatment or service
Mhm.
relatively quick or soon after, and notice that there still needs to be treatment done?
Sometimes. Well, I guess maybe to give an example for your situation, like let's say it was fumigated. Sometimes fumigation doesn't work, and we come in and we do see signs of activity, or we do see some live termites, and we tell them, "Oh, you got to do it again." So, like in that situation, I don't know if it was a misdiagnosis or
seal or whatever.
yeah,
Yeah.
then it might have. I would say maybe that's probably more common versus misdiagnosis.
Okay.
But it's possible misdiagnosed
Yeah,
too.
it is
because
possible though.
Unfortunately, the training that the inspectors get now.
Yeah.
It used to be. You needed,
Is it like a year or 2 years? A year?
you needed more training,
Yeah.
before you can get licensed or to do inspections. But unfortunately, there was a lot of pressure from the big mainland company, large companies that, hey, we need inspectors and we can't wait that long, pay them that long before they're actually able to do the inspections. And so there are things that they're supposed to do to get this information, knowledge. But unfortunately, how well they learn it in that short period of time, because right now I think it's only like a month that you need to be out there supposedly doing the inspections with people that know what they're doing to learn. But yeah, misdiagnosed, I don't,
Yeah.
it's possible, unfortunately. Yeah. And actually in this particular situation, the seller told the buyer side, hey, we're not gonna do the termite inspection because we just had it fumigated. And so it was more the buyer's agent said, you know what, never mind, we're gonna pay for it. They still have to do something if there's something found, but we'll pay for it. And that's kind of common, I think, now with what's going on in real estate, where part of the negotiation is, hey, the buyers will pay for the inspection, where typically it's the seller's responsibility. But to say not to do it, you can have this kind of situation happening. Yeah. So I know it's kind of tough now that, okay, to get the place, yeah, we're gonna have to pay for it. But to say you don't need it may also be a big factor also, especially if you have ground termites, yeah, doing damage. Yeah, so this is actually the same
Same.
house, the back of the wall. And the mud coming through, it was a nest in the shower stall. Yeah. And actually in a situation like that, even just by not using the shower for a while and cutting off the moisture, you actually wouldn't need to do any treatment, because once the water dries up, termites will die if they can't get to water. So with ground termites, just eliminating the moisture source sometimes can stop the problem. And so if you had an old house that they started a nest behind the wall, and then for some reason you stopped using it and used another bathroom, and then later on do renovations, and wow, what's all this mud back there? But the termites are all dead. And they died because no water was being provided to them. Okay, so this is a comparison of ground termite swarmer versus drywood termite swarmer. And if you kind of look at it, it's like they look like the same. They look very similar. And that's because they're both termites. Maybe actually this is not like the best picture to use.
Actually, the drywood termites is a little longer, but then this body got kind of.
I think it's maybe flipped over too.
Is it
No,
Fukuyama?
that could be
Maybe.
the top side.
Yeah.
So you don't see the actual body of the drywood termites. Typically ground termite swarmers tend to be more golden brown color. Drywood termites are typically darker colored. Ground termite swarmers tend to be more wide, little bigger. Drywood termites tend to be a little more narrow and long, skinny looking. Probably one of the easier things to notice, although maybe not as obvious in this, is when you look at the wings of drywood termites, it has a really rainbow effervescence looking coloring on it. Ground termites also have that, but it's not as noticeable because of the hairs on the wings. So they both have it, but with the drywood termites, it's really noticeable when you see that rainbow color on the wing. Yeah. Okay, drywood termites, really slow termite. Takes a long time for them to do damage. From the time that they get into whatever, door, cabinet, it can take up to 5 years before you actually see droppings coming out. And damage would be really minimal, but with drywood termites, unless you see the droppings, they're actually hard to find because the damage is really minimal. So even with tapping, we do tapping to try to listen for damage. Because the damage is so minimal, you won't actually even be able to hear the damage. And especially with condos, townhouses now, when people renovate, change cabinets, it's possible that there could be termites in them, but if they're only like 1 to 2 years old, even when you have an inspection done, you may not be able to detect termites in there. And so we typically like to tell the buyers, well, as of today, because that's what the inspection is based on, what we can see today, there's no signs of termites. But depending on when they decide to push the droppings out, could be, again, 3 years, 4 years later, and then now they start seeing droppings coming out. So they were in there, but unfortunately, there's no way to tell until they're pushing the droppings out. So with the drywood termites, the soldier is a little different from the ground termite soldier. They actually have a head that doesn't have pinchers on it. It's like a battering ram. So it's a hard mass. And what they do is when there's a disturbance, and typically it's against ants. Ants like to feed on termites, so they're trying to get into the nest. When there's a disturbance, the soldier goes to the hole and puts his head over the hole to block it so things cannot come in. With the ground termites, with the pinchers, they actually are attacking whatever's trying to get into the colony. So that's another easy way to tell if you see the actual termites and you see this kind of soldier in there, that's drywood termites. And if it has pinchers on it, then that's ground termites. Yeah. And actually on the picture, you could kind of see the rainbow color on the wings a little more easily. Yeah, with the drywood termites.
Okay. Let's see. So, oh, oopsie.
So this was just a picture of the termite
Well, that's kind of,
pushing.
yeah, opposite, because
Oh, oopsie.
you had 20 girls, 2 girls. Yeah. and
Sorry.
all boys.
Sorry, you're talking when we're taking a video.
Like, what is that? Okay, but this is actually just to show you the drywood termites actually pushing the
The
droppings
jumping,
out.
yeah.
And you can
Well,
actually,
that's kinda
you can actually see that
opposite.
sometimes when you see, oh, nice pile of droppings somewhere. And then if you look closely, you can actually see them pushing it out. Yeah,
Could you have both drywood and ground at the same time?
you can.
Like in the same area or in the same structure?
The same house. Like,
Oh, yeah.
no problem with both at the same time.
Yes.
And requiring treatment for both.
Yes, that's not unusual. And sometimes what happens is the ground termites, because the colony is so large, they'll take over where the drywood termites used to be. They'll just go through it. they'll kill off the drywood termites, and so sometimes you can see droppings in with the mud tunnels. But when you see the mud, that means the ground termites came through, and they would just devastate the drywood termites. This is in the attic, where you see these piles of droppings in there. Very typical of drywood termites is to see nice patterns of droppings, because they're pushing droppings out from one hole at a time. So we tell people, don't clean up the droppings until you find out where it's coming from, because that's your best clue as to finding out where the hole is. Yeah. Sometimes if it's only one or two areas, you can do spot treatments. If it's not for real estate transaction, but maybe for your own personal home, if you can find where the droppings are coming from, you don't have to fumigate the house just because you have one or two areas where you have drywood termites. You can do spot treatments. That's possible also. Yeah.
But just kind of drywood stuff.
Yeah, so another example of where they're pushing the droppings out from. So you can see the nice pile there. So you're always looking for the center of the pile and going straight up, and then the hole should be above that, unless there's something in the way that it's hitting on. This is comparison of carpenter ants versus termites. It's not unusual for people to see carpenter ants and they think they're having a termite problem, because carpenter ants, the Hawaiian carpenter ant, is like a termite, brownish in color. They can have wings like termites. A lot of times people don't realize that ants can have wings. And so they see this and they think, wow, we got that termite problem, but actually it's carpenter ants. And the easiest way to tell the difference is when you look at the body parts. Ants have three distinct body parts: the head, the middle, and the back section. And when you look at termites, it's the head and one long body. So it's like only two parts. Yeah. So that's the easiest way to tell the difference between termites and ants. But even the wings look different. Termites have two equal pairs of wings, so four wings that are all the same size. Whereas ants, they have four wings, but only two. They have two different sizes. Yeah, the front ones are longer, the back ones are a little smaller. Yeah. Looking at the antennas, like honeybees, elbowed antennas, same with the ants. Whereas with termites, they're kind of like one straight bead-like antenna. Yeah. And again, the narrow waist, so the three body parts, if you see that narrow waist, it's an ant, not a termite.
Okay. I guess
Maybe we should get the samples that we can send around.
what's
We have some, not live termites, but samples of the termite droppings that you can feel how hard it is. Yeah, so with drywood termites, people say, oh, dropping is black, so it must be old, or white, so it looks pretty fresh. But actually, color is just determined by what they're feeding on. It's nothing to do with old or new. But if we would hear it from homeowners to say, oh yeah, the other guy said it was black dropping, so it's old. And I'm like, who's telling you this kind of things? And I don't know if it's because they don't want to keep going back to check the termites because, they have it under warranty or whatever, but the color would never change. It's, if you have white droppings, it'll never turn to black to say now it's old droppings. That would be great if it did that, so it'd make it a lot easier to tell. But unfortunately, you can have white droppings, you can have black droppings, you can have mixture of colors. So it just depends on the wood that they're feeding on. Droppings are very uniform in shape and very hard. So a lot of times people may see maybe ant droppings or roach droppings, and it looks like termite droppings because they're from insects. But with roach droppings, they're actually softer. So if you don't mind feeling the droppings and it smashes easily, then you know it's not termite droppings. Even crickets have droppings that look similar. Silverfish, we see that a lot too when we're doing inspections. But those are not termite droppings. What else?
That's pretty much it. Well, you did a lot of biology.
Any questions about the two termites?
I have a question on, I mean, and I don't know if you're gonna address it or not, but I have a question about, some of the warranties. right?
Yes.
Is there ever a circumstance whereby a company won't want to honor a warranty because they'll say, oh no, that's old droppings? How do you, as a consumer or a homeowner, how do you enforce that to suggest that it's new droppings? Like, do they have the right to just invalidate or not honor the warranty due to the subjectivity of it being old droppings?
Oof.
So-
that, I mean, I guess you kind of want to watch who you, I guess, work with, first of all, because most times, I guess with a lot of the local companies, we haven't had a situation where it's like, oh, it's definitively, it's active and they won't take care of it, honor the warranty. So that's hard to say. I'm not sure.
What I would say is, typically, you have to have some trust in the company that
Yeah.
did the work. Yeah, so when, say, we do a termite inspection, one of the things that we ask for is the disclosure. And we've heard realtors say, why do you need the disclosure for? You don't need it, it has nothing to do with you. But actually in the termite, in the disclosure is a section about termites. And it'll tell you what was done. Hopefully they know what was done, because we've done inspections where you don't got the disclosure. We'll go through the house and, oh, there's droppings here, there's damage here. They don't say about when it was last fumigated. And so because the droppings aren't going to change, it can still look like they're active, especially if it's in the attic. You see nice piles like that. And so they don't say anything about treatment. Okay, no treatment, we're going to assume that it's active. And so we'll recommend fumigation. And then they'll come back and say, oh no, we had the house fumigated like a year ago and we have the warranty. Well, why didn't you give that information to the termite inspector? Because that helps to make the decision a little easier if he finds stuff. So to some extent, you have to trust the company that are doing the fumigation. You cannot say, well, I don't trust them, so I'm gonna recommend treatment. So the only time, I mean, and we've recommended fumigation even though the house was under warranty, but it's because we actually see the live termites, or we see it's a non-destructive inspection. So what we cannot do is, oh, there's termite damage here, break it open, look to see if there's live termites in there. We're not doing that, especially if it's in places that are visible. Maybe you can do that under the house or in the attic, be kind of discreet about it, but not rip everything apart, but maybe try to look to see if there's live termites in there. But you cannot check all the areas that have signs of droppings, especially older homes. And so to some extent, you're going to have to trust the company that did the fumigation. And part of it is you have a warranty with that company. And so if there's problems, they can always go back to the company and say, hey, we found stuff, and typically warranties with fumigation companies are either the first 1 or 2 years, they'll refumigate the house. And then after that, it's spot treatment. And so what I like to tell people is that especially the first year, really important to watch for droppings, because for whatever reason, maybe something went wrong. There was a leak someplace that they didn't know about it, and the gas leaked out too fast, and the termites weren't killed. And if the termites weren't killed, typically you start seeing droppings again within the first year. And that's typically an indication that it didn't work. Because even though fumigation is not prevention, when you take the tent off, all the gas dissipates. If new termites fly in, you're not gonna see droppings coming up that quickly. And so very important to watch that first year, because if you continue to have problems, then probably something didn't work and the company will refumigate the house for you. Yeah. Just because you see droppings doesn't mean it didn't work. It could be ants going into where termites used to be, and they'll push out the dropping. So it'll look like the termites are still alive because, wow, nice pile of droppings here. Clean it up, it comes back again. But then you look for where it's coming from. And a lot of times you actually see the ants going in and out of the hole. So you know that it's not the termites, because the ants and termites are not going to live together. Yeah. So it's really important to look at where the droppings are coming from, what's pushing it out.
So I
Unfortunately,
guess, well, for your question is, it just kind of just depends on the indicators of why why you think is active and what the company says to make sure it matches.
So as a follow-up question.
Yeah.
I know your guys' job is super, super difficult because some of it can be subjective,
Mhm.
time of day and all these other kind of things and factors and whatever the case is. Have you guys ever erred on the side of making a recommendation for treatment, even though you don't know for certain that there's active term? I know that
Mhm.
in the report, it kind of has that disclaimer in there that
Yeah.
it's visually what you can see.
Right.
But
Yeah.
have you ever erred on the side of like, there's droppings, to your point, but I
Yeah.
don't see the ants. I
Yeah.
don't know, and yes, I know they were treated a year ago or, 10 months or whatever it is.
Mhm.
Did you ever err on the side of, I think there should be treatment, because I don't know, I can't determine.
Usually it wouldn't, for if it's like that short a time frame, we would really look to see if there's actual live termites. Because typically, again, with that first year, that's when you'll see if something went wrong, then you'll see the termites. But if it's 5 years out, it's gonna be a little bit more tricky where we're like, well, it's kind of a long time from the time that they fumigated. So there's a good possibility that there's probably something active. And it's
So-
hard to determine how old the droppings are, how stuff. So if it's out of warranty over 5 years, we'll typically, if we see signs, then we'll typically just recommend fumigation.
You may err on the side of.
Yeah.
Yeah,
yes, depending on
Yeah.
the kind of
Condition,
damage,
yeah,
droppings
it's-
that we're seeing.
Mhm.
Yes, but typically if it was just done,
Yeah,
you
we,
kind of like have to trust the other
Okay, yeah.
company, because you don't want to get into this situation where, well, they didn't trust us, we're not going to trust them, and we
yeah.
have this. I mean, that shouldn't be.
Mhm.
Yeah, that's what the warranty is for, to protect, and so you got to kind of trust that.
But again, even with, it's hard, it's a tricky situation too, because even with fumigation, right, you're killing things on that day. Theoretically, once the tent comes off, there's nothing there. So again, something can fly right back in, it's not gonna die. So, and then well, there's something active now, then how do you know, and all this stuff, yeah.
So is there, with ground termites, I mean, I guess to some extent, it stops any penetration of ground termites, and it might be to some extent preventative. But
Yes.
what about drywood? Is there preventative measures for that? So that the the tent comes off, no seal, there's no gas.
Yep.
How can a homeowner with an older home protect themselves in a preventative way?
We say the best thing is painting and caulking, maintenance, just keeping the house well sealed is probably your best prevention.
I live in a really old home, so my old home, probably more than it was.
Doesn't matter.
Yeah.
That counts, but.
They're not gonna eat the bundle.
Yeah.
But yeah, as Lance said, you seal the house as best as possible.
Mhm.
And that's your best prevention against drywood termites, because if they can get into the structure, as long as they can crawl into the wood somewhere, they can get started. And so the less openings on the house, the harder for them to get in. And so with termite inspections, just knowledge of construction helps also. So for us, Old Mililani, majority of the homes there are untreated lumber. Just, they didn't use treated lumber till around 87, 88. It was available even from the 50s, but they didn't use treated lumber until it was mandatory in the building code. YPO Gentry. They use treated lumber for first floor only. Everything on the first floor down is treated lumber. Everything above that, second floor house, attic on the first floor house, all untreated lumber. And so knowing things like that helps
Helps.
us when we doing an inspection, because those are the places that are more susceptible to drywood termites. And so your prevention, drywood termites in millennial homes, very common. And so painting and caulking. I tell people in Mililani, that's your best prevention. If you don't do that, you're likely to fumigate your house every 5 to 7 years. And unfortunately, when the homes were built and painted, they only spray painted the house. They didn't do caulking. And so you look at the homes, you look at the rafters, you can see it's not caulked. Very common to have drywood termite damage in the eaves. Very common.
Just like to kind of show like how much it helps, like a house that's unpainted or uncaulked, you probably see maybe every other rafter has damage versus one that's painted and caulked well, maybe a few on the house. So it makes a real big difference, painting and caulking for prevention with drywood termites.
And not picking on painters, but they paint what you see. So if you look underneath the trims, not painted. You look at the top of beams, not painted. Excuse me.
So that's the point of exposure to termites.
Yeah.
And even water, because I don't know why they build beams sticking out of the roof line, but starts to rot or termite because it's sticking out beyond the roof line and it doesn't get painted. The main place it should be painted, but really common. You look at a lot of the homes that are untreated lumber, and the beams stick out. That's where they have rot and termites.
Any prevention tips for the ground termites?
Liquid treatment or baiting, but also watching for lumber sticking in the ground. If you have the siding and you're on the side of the hill and the dirt is going up against the house, you want to clear that dirt away. You want to see the base of the concrete. So if a tunnel is coming up, you can see it. With the dirt up against the house, they can go right up into the house and you won't see it. So that's earthwood contact. Excuse me. On the report. And so just clearing things away, dirt, even debris, anything that goes up against the house will block your view of ground termite tunnels coming up. So in Hawaii, the standard termite form is the PC9 form. And then, you have VA, FHA, and they said, oh, we need a VA or FHA form. In Hawaii, you don't. All you need is the PC9 because that's the acceptable form that's used in Hawaii. And you don't need to do a special form for VA or FHA. Thank you. Grab the water. Thank you.
I mean, I don't know, do we need to, I guess, is there any questions about the PC9 form?
It's
Pretty standard,
yeah.
yeah,
So the key is the scope of inspection. So it is a visual inspection. That's the main thing, what's visible and accessible. If the person is someone still living there, they got furniture, they got things in the shelves and closets. We cannot move all those things and check behind there. So it is limited to what's visible and accessible. Common inaccessible areas are like inside the double walls, false ceiling areas, there's no way we can check in those spaces. And so those things, but you should list it down to say what you cannot check. Sometimes houses are kind of low to the ground and you cannot get underneath. You should put inaccessible, crawl space too low, or no opening to get into the space, so I can't check it. Or it even depends on the size of the person. I mean, if the smaller you are, you're able to get into smaller spaces. The bigger you are, hey, can't 6 foot, whatever, 200-pound guy may not be able to get into the attic, but as long as
So I
you.
would make a poor inspector is what this is.
Not thinking. But as long as they put it down, hey, inaccessible to that person. Typically, it's anything 2 feet and lower is what's generally considered inaccessible. But you should note down, locked doors can't get in, whatever the situation is. That's what the section for inaccessible areas are. You put it down so that they know it wasn't checked for whatever reason. Yeah. When we do our inspections, even though it's a visual inspection, if you've seen us, we come with a stick with a ball on the end. And we use that to tap. You can't tap every square inch of the house, but you're tapping areas where you suspect termites to be. And so a lot of times that's how we find the termites. If you were just looking, you wouldn't see it. But because we're tapping, we hear these hollow sounds. And so it's just a tool to, help us to find termites. So I know and not everybody uses something like that. So they may come with a flashlight and they're just looking and they're not doing any tapping. Technically, they're not actually doing anything wrong, but that doesn't help your client if you're on the buy side and they're not finding the termites because they're not doing stuff that they can do to kind of look for termites.
I think this is the one most people are concerned about,
So
the treatment.
the recommendation line.
Yeah.
A lot of times, that's what people look at. Flip to that page, recommendation. No, okay, we're good. But yeah, so in terms of recommendations, it's typically because you suspect there's a problem. A lot of times we'll get asked, did you see live termites? Did you actually see the live termite?
Mhm.
And tell them, we can't always see the live termites because it's a non-destructive inspection. And so just knowing the warranty situation, no warranty, okay, there's droppings here and there's the hollow spots, okay, we have to recommend fumigation because we don't know. And they don't know when the last time it was fumigated, or there's no warranty on the house. With condos and townhouses, you can't recommend fumigation because sometimes, well, a lot of times it's not possible. And so now, what is the recommendation? Driver termites, which is really common now. Really, really common, especially when people do renovations. What do you recommend? Oh, what's really common? A lot of times we see spot treatment. Spot treatment is hit and miss. You can only treat what you can see. And so we rarely recommend spot treatments for
We don't
condos.
we don't
and
recommend.
Okay,
We don't.
hardly any.
No, we don't.
And it's because there's no guarantees to it. Yeah. So what is the recommendation if there's problems? Can be replacing. Yeah. There's heat treatment available now. I'm not sure how many of you are familiar with heat treatment. It is something that's been around for a long time. There was companies that tried to fumigate houses and use heat instead of gas to kill the termites. Natural, non-chemical method of killing termites. And it works if you do it correctly. But that's the key. Did you do it correctly? And it actually can be done. But there's could be side effects if you don't do it
Properly.
properly.
Mhm.
You can have damage because of melting, warping. And so you have to make sure that whoever is doing it does it properly. We don't and typically endorse anybody, but the person that we actually would work with would be High Temp Tech, Devin James, to do heat treatment because it to me he invested the most amount of time as to doing it correctly. He cuts holes in cabinets and put sensors in there to monitor the temperature. So he can watch to see how hot it gets, make sure it's hot enough to do the termites, but not too hot to do damage. And so that's one of the keys is not doing damage. And so from what we've talked to him, he seems to do it, the most thorough. And so if I recommend anybody to do heat treatment, it would be through him. There are others that do it, but as to do they control the temperature? Do they have disclaimers? Hey, we're not going to be responsible for damage. Then do you want to use somebody like that? Does it make sense? We heard somebody does it with the
Heat gun.
heat gun. It's like, okay, I don't know if he knows how he's gonna make sure he's killing the termites, but you come in there with a heat gun and just kind of blowing
Hot air.
hot air into the area. I don't know if I would trust that.
Mhm.
Yeah. So again, you need to make sure that whoever's doing it is gonna do it to minimize damage also, not do more damage than the termites. The unfortunate thing with heat treatment is it can be very costly. But it's a sure way to kill the termites. And with condos and townhouses, before heat treatment was available, wasn't uncommon for us to recommend replacement of cabinets. It's like, what do you mean change the cabinets? It's not fair to the buyer to have to continue to deal with termites in the future, right? So to recommend spot treatment that may not get rid of the problem is not the best recommendation that we can look at.
Mhm.
Yeah. If you're on the buy side, that's great. If you're on the sell side, it's like, what kind of recommendation is this? But I remember it was a condo in IAL, and this was a few years, I don't know, 5-10 years ago. Realtor called and said, hey, we see droppings all over the place. And at that time, heat treatment wasn't available. And I said, you know what, if we come in there, we do the inspection, we're gonna recommend replacement. And so she conveyed that to the seller side. They actually went and changed all the cabinets. Because that would have been the recommendation. But
That's
we're looking at what is the remedy to get rid of the problem.
Mhm.
We cannot look at, wow, this is gonna be really expensive. That's not our duty. Our duty is to get rid of the problem. And that's what the recommendation is. We cannot go by, it's a condo, can't recommend something that's gonna cost $15,000. Doesn't matter, because if the termites are still there, it's not for us to say, well, they're not doing that much damage, that's okay, you can deal with it. That's not a good recommendation. I remember recently, a few years ago, we went to a condo. When they bought it, that recommendation to them was, we'll put it on a 2-year spot treatment warranty. And it was floors, they had hardwood floors in the unit. And they said, the inspector said, no worries, I'll take care of it. We'll give you a 2-year warranty. 6 years later, he was still having problems with termites in the floors. And so they called us, we went in and said, you know what? You either got to replace the floor or do heat treatment. Because that's the only 2 ways you're going to get rid of the problem. Because especially with floors, unless they're pushing the droppings up, you don't know where they are. So, that kind of recommendation, some people don't like, but we cannot look at that. We have to look at, again, what is the best solution. Yes,
What about, like, I've heard there's orange oil treatment, and then, I don't know if anybody still does it anymore, but you could like remove the cabinet and put like in a chamber and.
Yep.
Fumigate.
Yep.
that
that's
way.
fine. Fumigation, removal, fumigating, bring it back. That's fine.
We
And-
usually do that, especially with doors or if it's upper cabinets, things that are easier to remove, but it's a little bit more tricky with the lower cabinets because of the countertops and whatnot. So, but if, yeah, we do recommend that too.
Yeah.
Have vaults that you can take it to. We work with Aloha too, but they're in Kapolei, I think. I think Extermical has one in Waipahu.
Yeah, but there's
Maybe,
others.
yeah,
I need to call and ask them
Yeah.
about if they have a chamber. And typically, it's more controlled, so
Yeah.
less likely to get it messed up if you're doing it in a chamber. But
And
orange
orange
oil, ooh,
Yeah.
it's a spot treatment. Ultimately, it's a spot treatment. I think the selling point is, especially with houses.
Mhm.
You don't have to move out, you don't have to bag your foods, you don't have to worry about your plants, nobody walking on your roof. You know, all these things that are negative for fumigation, that's what they're trying to sell. But what they're not really telling you is, we have to find the termites to be able to kill them. You got a 2-story house, how are you gonna check the eaves if there's termites out there? Even in the attic, it's super low. You can't get to it.
Mhm.
Orange oil is not something you spray on the wood and soaks into the wood.
Yeah.
It's something you have to get to the hole, inject it into the hole to kill the termites. And even at that, it may not get to all the termites.
So I think with that, we've had situations where they did orange oil treatment to a home and we did find active termites and we had to recommend fumigation. So it just kind of sucks for like the seller, yeah, because they had to pay for it. Yeah, unfortunately. And the
Yeah.
only person that kind of benefits is the orange oil company, unfortunately. Yeah.
Because, it's not, it's a spot treatment.
Yeah.
Um,
And I think with the commercial too, like it's kind of misleading how I know they were advertising a lot a couple years ago where they would like inject it and then it just spreads throughout the wood. And it's like, no, that's not really how it works. They did studies where it does move through the wood, but what they did is they got like a post or 2x4 and they had to stick it in the solution and leave it in there for I don't know how many hours, like days, a day, and then it kind of went through, but you can't do that once the house is built. Yeah, so
it's painted.
so
not
it's
gonna
kind of
work with the
misleading
paint.
on what they're telling you, what their capabilities are. Yeah, with that. So
Yeah, question?
What about the homes in Manila that are up in the built in the hills with a super high peak that you cannot get a tent over? What about those things?
That is a problem.
Yes. so it's kind of like I think at that point you should again talk to a pest control guy and then kind of see what your buyers are comfortable with, I guess, and knowing that you can't fumigate, so there's likelihood that they're always going to have termite problems, I guess.
Yeah,
So that's
unfortunately.
kind of what it comes down to, and see if they're comfortable
On
with
the
that,
side of the hill,
Yeah.
you can't seal it.
or they may have to replace things. It's not going to be as simple as just tent it.
Yeah.
They're going to have to.
So
do
you have
construction.
those situations with some homes that they're just built in a way that you can't fumigate it. Super high. The ground is not sealable.
Mm.
The roof is too steep, too dangerous that companies don't want to do it. That's possible. So what are you gonna do? I mean, you explain to the buyers, hey, there's termites in the house. There's no way that they can fumigate it. And so you're gonna kind of be buying a house that you might be treating termites
Mm.
and might have to do repairs eventually. But it's just something that, just the nature of the house, though it's built, that you can't do much about it, unfortunately. So yeah, the orange oil, and it's not cheap. can be as much as fumigating the house. But if the house can be fumigated, as Lance said, we did an inspection where we found termites. Hey, there's a better treatment that'll get rid of the problem. You gotta fumigate the house, even though they just had it done a few months ago.
So it's kind of tricky with this inspection because there's no standard on if you find this is the recommendation. It's all based on the opinion of the inspector. So you may have different treatment recommendations from different inspectors. But like for us, it's kind of standard where if we find gyro termites, if the home can be fumigated, it's gonna be we're gonna recommend fumigation. So yeah. Or in condos, if it can be heat treated, we're gonna recommend heat treatment or replacement. It's no spot treatments, stuff like that. So I guess
Anything
Yeah.
in questions about the inspection? Because I guess that's the key, is knowing the inspector.
Yeah.
How they do the inspection. Unfortunately, again, there's guys that have been in the industry only a few months and they're already out there doing inspections. If you're on the sell side, great. But if you're on the buy side, is that in your best interest of your clients? And so that's something to think about. And I don't know how many other people or companies do it, but we offer summaries at the end of the inspections. And so if your client or you folks want to come out, we encourage the buyers to come out if they can, especially if they don't know anything about termite. They came from the mainland, they're new to Hawaii. If they can come to the inspection, we don't mind that, you know.
So we
explain
kind of
about-
do this termite 101, not as long, but
Right.
just a shortened version of stuff like this. And then we point out other pest stuff too, like if there's rodents, if there's any other like roaches and stuff like that, and kind of help them with that too.
Yeah, so if they make the effort to come out,
Mhm.
if we see things that, even though it's not termite related, hey, we'll let them know, hey, you gotta do this when you move in. Plug this hole so the rats don't get up into your house, you know?
Mhm.
So if we see stuff that, you know, benefit them, other pests, because you're out there, we'll let you know those things. Yeah, so I think it's very beneficial. Typically with most companies, home inspection, most people go to. Termite inspection, send me the report. I mean, works for us too. We don't have to spend as much time there, but we're willing to spend the time, you know, if you folks want to be there.
Do you look for bed bugs?
If we see it, but we're not really looking for it because bed bugs are in your personal items. So they're in the bed, chairs, stuff like that. So unless it's really obvious, we can't tell you we'll see it.
But if we do notice it, we'll let you
Yeah.
know.
So sometimes when we're doing inspections in a condo and you're
Mhm.
checking along the baseboards, oh, this is signs of bed bugs, you know, now. Dead bodies, blood spots on the walls.
Yeah.
Yeah, fortunately, it's not as common now than a few years ago, but it's still around, unfortunately, especially with travel. You can bring it from wherever. So
There's one question on this one. What did it say? What was Alvin's guy's name his name was Devin James
oh, okay.
for the question that was in the chat. I don't know. Or James? James? Can't see the name.
It was answered.
Oh, it was answered? Oh, okay. Sorry.
Yeah, Devin James, not Joe.
Okay.
Okay, but yeah, so I mean, typically other pests that you can see, ants, centipedes, roaches are probably kind of common, rodents to some extent.
Yep.
So we'll tell people, cut the trees back, make sure it's not touching the house, keep plants cut away from the house. That'll help to minimize other pests from getting into the homes. But ultimately it is a termite inspection report, and that's what goes down on the report. We won't say anything about ants or roaches or centipedes. There's also platypus beetles that are not super common, but not unusual either. They can do damage a lot slower than termites. The droppings are different. They're sawdust. You can see nice piles of sawdust. So you know it's something that's eating into the wood, but if you feel it, it's very fine. Whereas termite droppings are like sand. So it doesn't go on the report, but we'll mention, hey, there's some platypus beetles. And we don't say what that the seller's got to do anything about it.
Yeah.
But because you're there and you know about it, then you can go to them and say, hey, there's beetles here.
Platypus beetles? Oof. Probably the best treatment is heat treatment, because with fumigation, it doesn't kill the eggs. And the hard part with beetles is the eggs can hatch and then get started again. So if it's especially in a condo, would probably be either heat treatment or replace also.
So doors are common to have platypus beetles,
Beetles,
so
yeah.
easy to replace that. But cabinets, unfortunately, heat treatment is again
Probably the
because of
best.
the egg stages, the best treatment. So in regards to fumigation, the fumigation doesn't kill egg stages, even with drywood termites. It doesn't kill the egg stages. But with termites, they need the adults to take care of them. So that's why you don't have to worry about the egg stages. I kind of remember one of the orange oil commercials, they used to say, fumigation doesn't kill termite eggs, so that's why they got to come back. But that's not true. Fumigation, even though it doesn't kill the eggs when they hatch out, they'll die anyway because the adults aren't there to take care of them. They actually have to pass on this microorganism in their gut system to the babies, and then they can digest the food. Yeah, if not, they can try to eat the wood, but they're not able to digest it, so they'll end up dying. Yeah, I mean, that's what we learn in our classes. That's one of the first, well, not first, but one of the things you
main
learn with
things.
fumigation, that even though the eggs aren't killed, they're gonna die anyway, the ones that hatch out, so you don't have to worry about the eggs.
Yeah.
That's why fumigation is not good for beetles. It's not good for silverfish. Even roaches, to some extent, doesn't kill the eggs, so even roaches may not, you can have them continuing.
Doesn't affect ants either, does it?
It kills whatever is there.
Yeah.
But
Remember the house we were just at? It was like infested with ants.
Yes.
After it was tempted.
so what happens after fumigation, especially with ants, if you don't treat around the house to stop them from coming in, they're coming in to feed on all the things that died in the house. And yeah, you can have huge trails of ants all around. Yeah, so doing actually exterior spray right before fumigation is a good way to minimize ants from coming back into the house. Yeah. Okay,
Okay.
have you guys seen this albino cockroach? There's no such thing. Actually, what's happening is they're molting and they shed
Shed
their
their
skin.
outer
That's how they grow.
It's disgusting.
Yeah.
Sorry.
And then eventually they'll turn color.
Yeah.
They get their brown color. It's just in that transition period where they came out of their old shell,
Mhm.
they're white, and then they'll eventually turn color. Okay.
And this is your contact information.
Yep,
Yes.
pretty much it.
Awesome. Thank you so much for pouring into us and answering all these questions and teaching us. I greatly appreciate it. Does anyone on Zoom have any questions for them that we didn't go over? Anyone in person? That was really informative.
A lot of information, sorry.
Now we're all gonna get our license, right, to do our own. That's not us.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you so much. I greatly appreciate
Okay,
it.
all right. You're very
Nice seeing you
welcome.
guys
Yes,
again.
you too.
Thanks, guys.
Okay.